If you're on that road, at some point, it can come in days, it can come in weeks, it can come in months, it can come in years, comes a point of absolute fear. Oh, the kind of fear you don't know yet. Fear. And it is this deep fear of, oh my God, I do not know anymore what's going to happen to me. You stop being a manifester. You stop being a projector. You stop being a reflector. You stop being conditioned by the world around you. You stop being homogenized. You come to your own unique authority and you discover the truth of life. That there's no need to know until it's time. That there's nothing to do until it happens. That there's nothing to be until it's there. You're just vibrating. And it's all good generators do. You're just vibrating. This is life itself. It doesn't mean that your mind won't think about tomorrow or yesterday. It means that you will live in the absolute uncertainty of the moment and you'll be totally secure. This is the honor of being a sacral being. There's nothing like it. You see, you have to learn to see that that's sacral within you, that it knows great truths for you, truths that you yourself, mind, never grasped, never understood. Not everybody is here to wake up. You know, I'm a very straightforward man. Not everybody in this room will wake up. Knowledge is not power. Just because you know something doesn't mean it changes you. I assume that you see by now that the power of the not-self is deep, that conditioning is deep, that you already have complex lives that you entered into incorrectly, that you already have tensions in your lives and problems in your lives, and all kinds of people that you deal with, and so forth and so on. It's not for everybody to wake up. It isn't. After all of these years, I see that it's difficult to be deconditioned. Children will never have such a problem if they're raised correctly. What you will discover in this, whether you get to that point or not, what you'll discover is that by following your strategy, by honoring that strategy, at least as much as you can, that it will change your life. That it will lift a burden away from your shoulders. That it will give you a way to understand things about yourself. That will give you some sense of health and balance about the way in which you meet this life. But you know, being awake, particularly for generators, you know, you cannot be half pregnant. Projectors can go a long time without having a real experience of their strategy and still in the end be more successful than generators. You know, the whole thing about the generator is dealing with fear. There is so much fear in this life. The generators that have been the most successful in the years that I've worked have been the ones who are the most radical in their nature. You know, they're the ones that were able to take the biggest risk of all, which is to surrender. See, generators don't believe that life is here for them because they're generators. They're creating the life force. Their assumption is that it's not for them. It's something that they have to work through. But it's all here. Whatever you need as a generator is here in this life. Whatever you want is here in this life. But the only way that you're going to be able to get there is that you have to be able to convince yourself and your mind that your sacral response is something you can truly trust to tell you the truth. And this is the way that we create a technique for the mind in order to get the mind involved in verifying of all things. Get the mind to verify that your sacral is a good leader. Now that's something to get the mind to realize that its greatest threat is really worthy. And only when you trick the mind that way, only then as a generator do you have a chance to really break through. But your mind has to accept that your sacral is really your authority. That's quite a process. We were talking about generators, and we were talking about the irony of what it is to be a generator. See, to know thyself is really something very special. And the mental technique of generators is a natural outflow of this knowledge. As I said, I'm a very individual ego manifester, and when I started to do my work, I had very little consideration for people's process. My concern was trying to see if the knowledge was transferable at any level and whether or not it made sense for other human beings. I was in a totally different thing. And what I got to see after the first 7 years that I was teaching, I got to see that the great difficulty, aside from the fact that people didn't have good synthetic tools at that time, the great difficulty was in how you go through the process. I began to see more and more deeply how destructive the not-self mind is, how it controls, the way in which it controls. And various techniques have emerged in human design from people who've been involved in these processes. As a matter of fact, there's a new organization that's about to be licensed by Jovian Archive Corporation that owns the rights to human design. And this is human design coaching, which in fact is run by a Jungian psychologist from Austria. And basically it is the teaching of rave psychology, which is a whole new level of understanding how to work with others and the ability to be able to coach people through their processes, to be able to help them in realizing their potential within the context of strategy. When I lived here in Sedona in 1998 and 99, in my time living here, I had a lot of contact with many people in this community. And out of that, and it's, I know that you can't stand being pointed out, but it is in fact Marianne who's responsible for this generator strategy, which I think is one of the better things that came out of my years of working in America. That is, she sat down one day with somebody that she trusted and asked that person to ask her all kinds of questions. This process of response, of question and response, is at the very, very heart of the generator process. It is the most extraordinary thing about the gift of being a generator, is that you do have the capacity to be able to know your truth directly. If you're a generator and somebody says to you, you feel okay, and you go, you know there's something wrong. I mean, you know there's something wrong, even if your mind hadn't noticed. If somebody says to you, do you love me? And you go, you know you really do not love them. I mean, you know that. It's simply there. It is your truth. And you see, the not-self mind, rooted in the open centers, what it establishes for the generator, what it establishes for all of us, is a catalog of who we think we are and how much better it could be. You know, it's this huge catalog, and it has nothing truly to do with us. It doesn't. It doesn't. It has to do with the not-self and the comparison game. It has to do with the pain of the not-self. But it's not here to be the most directly truthful of all beings. I mean, if we were to set up a scale of justice here, the great Libran scale of justice, and we would put the generators on one side of the scale and the rest of us on the other, Only the generators way down the scale of truth. I mean, after all, I'm an initiator. I'm an initiator, so I can not initiate or pick my times of initiation. I can be tricky. I can be whatever. I'm not necessarily truthful other than to myself. Same is true for projectors and reflectors. I mean, we're human beings. We're designed with specific traits. Generators come into the world to be absolutely honest. It's one of the most horrifying things for generators, is that they're absolutely honest. And it is an honesty that does not come from conditioning. It's an honesty that emerges out of their sacral, and it's spooky. It's spooky. But you see, all the generator has ever wanted to know is, who am I? Oh, please, if you're not a generator, get rid of that pressure. I mean, get rid of that pressure. It's a horrible pressure. It's the pressure that's been imposed by so many people and so many teachers. You know, it's not for you. Forget about it. Forget about it. You'll find out. But not directly. Not directly. You know, if you're a manifestor, you find out who you really are by the impact that you have and who you impact. You know, when you're a projector, you know, you recognize who you are by who you can guide. You know, if you're a reflector, you don't exist. Only your community exists. You know, it's very different. We each have very unique roles in this life. All of us. All of us. Bless you. If you're a generator, everything begins with, who am I? Everything begins with, who am I? And from the moment that you walk out of this room, if you're going to begin your experiment as a generator, that there is a condition that you must fulfill. You must commit yourself to finding out immediately who you are. Immediately. You don't have to wait. You don't have to wait. It can take a manifestor, a projector, and a reflector a full 7 years to realize who they are as they go through their cycle. It's intended to take a generator 1 or 2 or 3 evenings. And they know who they are. Right away. Now remember, this is all about the mind. See, look. The mind knows, all minds know, that they're not the true authorities. Otherwise, they wouldn't work so hard at holding on to it. They all know. And the moment that they actually meet your inner authority, and the moment that they recognize your inner authority's power, is the moment that the mind actually will stand back. Doesn't stop trying to manipulate you. But it takes less of an active role in your life. Now again, this is a cellular process. It takes time. If you're a generator and you find out who you are, what you're basically doing is involving your mind in a discovery. Just as the manifestor mind goes, don't forget Jane and Judy. You know, put them on the list too because they're going to be impacted. The mind gets involved in the game. Mind loves this game. Mind loves research. Mind loves pulling out all the numbers, looking at all the comparisons. This is mind. So you trick the mind. You're a generator and you say, okay, mind, we're going to find out who we are, right? And the mind says, okay, that should be interesting. Let's see how stupid all this is. You know, I mean, the mind's in the game. See, the mind can never say, okay, I'm going to go along with you. Let's see. It doesn't. But it can't stop the process either because it's a sucker for the truth. All minds are. All minds seek truth in one way or another. Unfortunately, they're seeking it through the not-self and there's no answer. It's like all these people with open head centers and all the questions that don't matter. So look, the generator goes out. Find somebody you trust. Not your lover, please. Because the first question will be, do you love me? And you might go, And the rest of the evening is really fucked because nothing's going to happen, eh? You're not going to find out who you are that night, eh? Not going to work. Eh? Don't do that. Eh? Sit down with somebody you trust. And sit down with somebody you trust and have them ask you everything. I mean, Human Design America has produced a package for generators that has a whole series of questions because, surprisingly enough, it's not necessarily an easy thing for a friend of yours to actually be able to ask the questions that really matter for you. And there's so many to ask. And by the way, it's not just spiritual questions. Most of it is just mundane. It's just mundane. You want to check and see where you are as a generator? You now know the strategies of your open centers. So you've got an open ego, and you have the person ask you, you still trying to prove something? And your sacral will go, uh-huh. You know? You want truth, you'll get truth. You'll get your truth. Your truth. Now, it doesn't mean that the mind doesn't try to manipulate that. It does everything in its power to try to confuse you about what the results of that experiment will bring. Because you see, most of what you'll go to are things that your mind would agree with. I mean, after all, it's not like you're going to discover that you're you're totally different person. You don't. You don't. You find out basic truths about yourself that you never really could see. Basic truths that because of your conditioning you didn't want to look at. Things you were avoiding, things you were holding on to, things you were trying to get rid of, things you were trying to prove. All of that stuff. Yeah. Do you have sound now? Oh, isn't that very good? Okay. So as a generator, you walk out the door and you find somebody that you trust and you sit down and you have them ask you anything and everything that they possibly can. And you begin to listen to yourself. And you begin to listen to what you respond to. It's your truth, after all. And it really means everything. It's not just about where you live and who you're with. It's what you like to eat and what you like to wear. And it's everything. It's everything that's you. That's you, because this is your journey. Now think about what's happening to your mind. You know, your mind is going along with this. Eh? Most of the time the mind is saying, well, this grunting seems to be reasonably accurate. And then all of a sudden you go, the mind is right there. What do you mean, Really? Really? Is that true? And you see, in that moment, the mind has something else. What happens to it, mind is curious. It's like, well, if that's different, is there anything else that's different? This is just the mind, It's really stupid. It really is. It just goes along for the ride. Oh, that's interesting. That's different. I don't agree with it, but that's different. Maybe we should look at something else and see if that's different too. And the mind is in the game. It's just doing the research. It loves to come up with all the calculations. But slowly but surely what happens is that every time the sacral is responding, generators have never lived that way. It's like having a car and you've never really used it properly. You've never really driven it. You've never really felt what that motor can do for you. Because in that experience of being asked, for the first time in your life, you're being treated with respect. I mean, you're being treated with respect. You're being asked. You're being asked for your authority. What's your authority on this subject? What's your authority on this subject? What's your authority on this subject? Oh, it's an incredible experience. And you see, in doing that, what you come to is you come to a place where the mind says, well, all right, let's see where this leads us. See, the mind doesn't know what the sacral is, any more than the mind understands the spleen. Mind doesn't get it the way that works, because that's not the way mind works. The fact is that the mind assumes that sooner or later, that grunting and groaning is going to get you into the same place that mind always gets you to. That is a failure. And then mind is going to be able to jump in and once again triumph for the not-self. So the mind is gambling on the fact that all this grunting and groaning is going to get you into trouble. And that sooner or later you're going to get to a place of extreme fear. You see, the last step, it's the last step for all generators, is this incredible place of fear. It's the fear of not knowing what's going to happen to you. And that's the moment that the mind is at its most powerful. Oh, is it powerful? You know, it's like, this is crazy. I don't know what's going to happen. And then the mind creates all the fears. Well, actually, some strange Bulgarian's going to show up, you know, and ask you if you want to spend the rest of your life somewhere deep in the Caucasus, you know, looking after black sheep. And you go, uh-huh. And you leave your house and your home and your family and your community, and you end up in the middle of nowhere staring at black sheep. And it's just your mind trying to scare you even more into surrendering back to the not-self. Forget all this. This is madness. We can't live this way. We don't know what's going to happen. I don't want to go to the Caucasus. You know? That's not the way it works. It really isn't. It isn't. But it's a magical moment for generators. You know, when you get to that place, you really know you've done something very special. You know, you've gone through a deep deconditioning experiment, and at that point, the only thing in front of you is real surrender. That is not knowing and not being afraid. You know, you can't know. You can't. Otherwise, there's no magic. Right? But you can't be afraid either. Because if you're afraid, then you don't know that there's only magic. And there is only magic. You know, this is the road for the generator. You know, and again, whenever I talk about generators, whenever I talk about this kind of phenomena, you know, it brings me back to the very same thing. It's easy to do. And with this technique, it's even easier to do. It gives you a chance to involve your mind in that process. It gives you a chance for your mind to want to research the potential of a new you. And while the mind is going along with that and helping you in the research, slowly it's losing power over you. One morning it wakes up and realizes that it's lost all control. That there you are on the brink of, well, emptiness. And it goes nuts. It does everything in its power to try to pull you back from that brink. You know, this is the place of awakening. And it's the place that waits for all generators. Now, if you go through this exercise, you have to keep something in mind. You know, half of humanity are emotional. And that means that half of all generators are emotional. Quite literally, when you're dealing with the emotional center, there is no true awareness. It's not there. Emotional beings always have to go through the process of recognizing that they can only be clear, and clarity isn't a complete thing. It's not. When you're an emotional generator and you get a whole series of questions, make sure that those series of questions are recorded. That is, recorded in the sense that the questions are written down. It's something essential for you. Because you see, whatever you respond to the first time, you have to do it again. Give yourself a week. Give yourself a week. Give yourself time to move in your wave. And then repeat the process. Same questions. Now, for an emotional being, the recognition that in any of those questions a response will be different is a real Satori experience. Because you will see evidence of your wave. It's very important for you to see evidence, literally evidence of your wave. And what that means is that there's something that wherever you are on your wave in that moment, you go to, that you discover a week later you're going And this is what it is to be an emotional person. And what you'll notice is that in any of those where your response is different, you haven't waited long enough to be clear. I mean, you haven't waited long enough to be clear. You just need more time. You know, it's one of the things to see very clearly about the emotional system, that the emotional wave is a distortion. It's only giving you a very, very fixed perspective in the moment. If you're an emotional person and you meet me, you will take me in according to your wave of the moment. That's it. That doesn't mean that you actually have an impression of me. That is, you have a sampling of me. And not a sampling of me in the sense of a sample of me. It's a sample of how you can perceive me. Now, if you meet me again tomorrow, it's going to be different. You're going to have a different sample, and that sample is you, where you are in your wave. And so when you're dealing with the other and you're an emotional person, everything is about patience. Patience. You cannot know the truth unless you wait. You can't. And it's not a complete truth. It's a clarity about something. And the longer you wait, the clearer you become. Some things don't need a lot of clarity. Other things do. Some things can be clear in hours. Other things can be clear only after years, like relationships with family. The feelings attached to these things. You know, the emotional system is all about honoring the wave. No truth in the now. So if you're an emotional generator, you have to recognize that one of the most important learning things for you is not simply learning through your sacral that you have a unique identity, that you have your unique authority to express yourself in terms of being asked for that authority. But the fact is that that response of yours is always conditioned by where you are emotionally, and you'll be able to see it. Repeat the same questions a week later, and you will see that your response system, that there's going to be certain questions where you have lost that aha or and it's become something else. In other words, your wave has moved and you can see the movement of that wave. I want to show you something. When you're looking at the emotional center, first thing is that this channel, the 59-6 channel of intimacy, the 6th gate is a very important gate. The 6th gate is the master gate of the emotional system. It's out of the 6th gate that all of the waves are initiated. If you're somebody who has the 59-6 as an emotional channel, you do not appear to be emotional. People with the 59-6 rarely display emotions. And if you want to see emotions come out of them, hug them. And then you'll feel the whole emotional wave come out of their body. But the fact is that people who are designed for intimacy, that these people designed for intimacy, they have what's called a flat emotional system. You don't notice that there's anything emotionally different unless you actually have physical contact with them. When you're looking at the emotional center, there's 3 streams that work out of the emotional center. And streams are always made up of 4 gates. The first stream here is the abstract stream of desire. And it goes out the outside, the 41st gate, the 30th gate, the 36th gate, the 35th gate. This is the stream of desire. This is the human experiential way. This is the way of life, driven by desire to expectation, the 35th gate at the other end. In the center, you have the individual emotional process. And this is the stream of emoting. Now, this stream is both emotional and melancholic. It's deeply associated with poetry and music and linguistics and all kinds of artistic expression. However, it is the moodiest and most emotional of all the streams. And it is the stream of passion. When you come to the inside, you have a unique stream, a tribal stream that doesn't go to the throat, but goes to the ego. And this tribal stream, from the 19 to the 49, the 37 to the 40, this tribal stream, this is the stream of emotional need. So we have three things. We have three emotional processes. We have the process of desire, the process of passion, and the process of need. And each of those waves operate differently. Differently. The abstract wave is a crash wave. A crash wave. And what that means is that desire builds. And desire builds to a peak. When you're looking at the expression of desire through the 35-36, the channel of transitoriness, the 36 gate is the gate of crisis. It is the gate of inexperience looking for experience. By the way, because it is desire, it is highly sexual. From inexperience to experience. And that experience in the 35th gate is the gate of expectation. All desire is about expectation. So as you build up in the desire, you eventually get to a crisis point. And the crisis point is the pressure of inexperience waiting for the opportunity for experience. And in that place, as you build the wave, that wave both contains hope and pain. You know, the hope that you'll have the experience, the pain that you may not have the experience, the hope that you'll have it, the pain you may not, and so forth and so on, until you finally have the experience. And the only way to really understand this is the nature of, an orgasm. You finally get to the point, you have the orgasm, everything after that's flat. In other words, it's this crescendo where you build and you build and you build and you build and you build, and then it snaps and crashes. This is the abstract crash wave. And at the end of this crash wave is blame. The individual process. The combination of the emotional system and its chemistry and the individual circuitry and its chemistry leads to a deep emotional moodiness. Emotional moodiness. Now again, understand the basic dilemma of humanity. Basic dilemma of humanity is what we do is that we personalize everything and we personalize chemistry. So the moment that we go down in our emotional wave, we think it's the fault of something. That either we did something or somebody on the outside did something. There's always some kind of projection on the other. When you're an individual and you have individual melancholy, the tendency is that when you're not in a good mood, that you blame that on yourself, you blame that on the outside world. This is the way in which melancholy operates. I'm somebody who's purely individual. And somebody who has suffered from melancholy all of my life. But I've also been an artist all of my life. I've been a musician all of my life. Melancholy for me has always been an opportunity to be creative. And that is what the essence of melancholy is all about. Whenever you meet anybody that has strong individuality in their design, you're looking at somebody who potentially can have a creative life. And it's not just about the fine arts. It's simply about a creative life. Whether that's the way you create a garden or, it doesn't make a difference what it is. It's a creative life. When you're dealing with the emotional system and you're dealing with moodiness, then you're dealing with a very different kind of wave. Individual emotional people, particularly 1222s, because they are the expression of it. You cannot read their emotions. They often don't even feel like they're emotional people. They don't. Now, the 3955 is different because it's very provocative. If you have a 3955 child, you'll understand how powerful their emoting capacity is because they can crank you up emotionally. It's the great channel of the actor-actress. They can cry at the drop of a hat. They can put on a scene on a dime. I have a 4-year-old that can embarrass me in 8 seconds. 8 seconds. He's a 3955. He can instantaneously put on a scene that makes it look like I have just beaten him to death and he's dying. So they can be very provocative. When you look at 1222s, though, you don't notice that. This is the only social channel of individuality. And it's a social channel for strangers. The great difficulty for people who have the 1222 is that they assume that their social capacity with strangers means they're going to be successful with intimacy. And it's not true. They're not successful with intimacy at all. They're not. Their gift is to be attractive to strangers so that they can mutate them. But if they hang around the strangers too long, familiarity breeds contempt. because they're freaks, after all. And the moment that they're social, they can also be very antisocial, because the 1222 can be very antisocial. And when you're looking at their wave, you don't notice that they're emotional until they peak or spike. And this is what we call the melancholic, emotional melancholic episode. And what happens to them is that in most cases they spike down. And this is when they can descend into the depths of real melancholy. You've got a lot of problems in the 3955 that moves through this circuit. Problems with food. This is where you have bulimia, this is where you have anorexia nervosa, this is where you have the emotional system trying to compensate for unhappiness. It is very difficult for the emotional wave to get going because the individual process is rooted in passion. In passion. And passion doesn't flame in a moment. Desire does. Desire is instantaneous. When you have desire in you, you look at somebody, if it's desire that's driving you, it is instantaneous. But if you're an individual, passion is a slow business. Imagine a couple of abstract people meet each other, put eyes on each other, have desire for each other. They immediately leave the scene and go find some place where they can enjoy each other. Gone. By the way, they both blame each other for a lousy night the next day, but that's another story. Individuals are very different. If you meet an individual couple, you will find them in a cafe sitting across from each other, staring kind of gaga ugu at each other and telling each other their life stories. Endlessly. Endlessly. Because everything about being individual and everything about passion is that passion is acoustic. Passion is acoustic. You can only turn on passion through music and words. Passion is acoustic. Or the sound of nature, or whatever it is that turns you on acoustically. But passion is acoustic. Only individuals want to babble how much they love somebody. It is an acoustic necessity. Abstract person doesn't care about love, they care about good sex. Individual cares about love. And so emotionally, and in the moody sense, they can suffer. The most common form of love for individuals is unrequited love. That is, you love someone or something that you cannot have. This can be the great joy, by the way. It spawned art for centuries, unrequited love. But it is better for an individual to love somebody they do not have than to have somebody that they do not love. And if you're an individual and you're moody, you have to understand that you cannot make love if you're not in the mood, that you cannot have a partner if you're not in the mood, that you cannot work if you're not in the mood, that there is nothing for you to do. You cannot eat unless you're in the mood, because that's the nature of who you are. And you're an emotional being on top of it. And so the emotional wave of the individual is often ignored until it spikes. And then everybody thinks they have an incredible problem, particularly the emotional person who just spiked. Right? Chemistry. There's no reason to be given to chemistry. It's one of the most profound lessons to learn. You're not in charge of your genetic vehicle. You're not in charge of its instructions to your biochemical processes. That the chemicals that we call emotion, the chemicals that we call melancholy, they are not there and active because of something the world does or something you do. It's just the way your body works. It's just the way your body works. It's nothing else. It's just chemistry. It's not a reason. When you're an individual and you wake up in the morning and you're moody as hell, the not self is going to climb in there, in your brain, and it's going to say to you, we would be happy if it weren't for her, him, it, whatever. Immediately, that's what the mind does. You're an emotional person. You're at the low end of your wave. Your mind is in there saying, life is really horrible, and I know why it's horrible. It's him, it's her, it's it. And in many cases, you turn it on yourself. It's me. I'm not good enough. I've never been good enough. Blah, blah, blah. On and on. See, the moment that you take a chemistry and you identify with the chemistry, you're lost. You really are, right? The moment you identify with the chemistry, you're gone. Bye-bye. See ya. You can't. If you're an individual emotional being, your whole life is about doing what you have a passion for. And that the passion has to come to you, has to build over time. You can only do that by honoring your strategy. There isn't any other way. There isn't. And that in honoring your strategy, you have to recognize no truth in the now. See, I used to despise the emotions. I mean, really, despise them. It was like all the crap I had gone through in my life dumped into me through emotional systems. And there was even a part of me that blamed them, Look what you did to me, my mother, my sister, my whatever, my ex-wives, whatever, But I love the emotional system. I love it. It's sexy. It's full of joy and pleasure. It's an incredible thing. It's incredible when it's clean. Wow. When it's clean and you're on there for a ride, it's wonderful. And you see, the moment that an emotional person recognizes that their awareness, their clarity about what is correct for them in this life is only the privilege of time. Time. You have to wait. If you're an emotional generator and you're going through a question and response episode, you have to recognize it's not enough to go through it once. You have to go through it again. And you have to go through it again to be clear. On the inside, we have the tribe. And tribal emotion is a ratchet. And the way a ratchet works, the way a ratchet works, 2 step forwards, 1 step back. 2 step forwards, 1 step back. And this is the whole thing about the emotional tribal person. You walk into the room and you say to your tribal partner some comment, some offhand comment. I noticed that something wasn't done. Not expecting that would be a big deal comment. And it so happens that the generator in that moment, or whoever it is in that moment, the emotional being in that moment, in that moment they take in that information, and it really upsets them. But no emotion comes out. There is the original burst, but it's immediately ratcheted back. And it's ratcheted back because of the nature of the circuitry itself. When you're dealing with the abstract desire, the theme is share. Let me share my crisis with you. Thank you. When you're dealing with the individual, it's empowerment. Let me empower you with my love. When you're dealing with the tribe, it's about support. And so in that moment where you get upset about something, there's this ratchet up where you're ready to just start that emotional, and then there's this, but you're here to support them, and they're here to support you. Now hold on, maybe we can just pull this back a bit. And so it ratchets back. Unfortunately, it doesn't stop, because once it starts, it's got to come out. And of course, it doesn't happen right away. The partner goes out of the house and goes and does their thing, and this ratchet is working all day. 2 up, 2, 1 back, 2 up, and 1 back, and 2 up, and 1 back, and 2 up, and 1 back. And it keeps on going. And sometimes it can last days. Sometimes it can last weeks. There are some very odd circumstances where it can truly last years. Right? And it just ratchets and ratchets and ratchets. And then all of a sudden, that person who set you off in the first place, they walk into the room and say hello, and you tear this enormous strip off of them. They have no idea where it came from. They're totally amazed. When I just said hello. The whole thing comes, all of it goes blurting out. The other person saying, you've been carrying this around all this time, blah, blah, blah. So this is the wave of the tribe. Now remember that I'm describing them in isolation. Human beings have complexities. We have aspects of this, and we've got aspects of that, and we've got aspects of the other. It's simply about understanding something about the emotional system. It has different drives. Desire, passion, need, they're all there. And it's desire, passion, need for food, for sex, for pleasure. Not pain. Not pain. See, this is my thing with the emotional system. When the emotional system is clear, even when it's down, it's correct. It's not disturbing. And it's not poison. And it's one of those magical things about the emotional system when it's correct. And it's just about time. It isn't about anything else. I know how difficult it is for particularly emotional generators because they're power beings. I know how difficult it is for them not to jump on the first response. And mentally, this is a way to train them. When they go through that experience of the first day and they go through that list, depending on where they are on their wave, they got this, and they have all of their answers, and some of them are surprising, and some of them they're mulling over. But only when they go through the second experience do they really see clearly, yes, I change. I change. I'm not really clear. Time then becomes not simply a process of learning patience, but time becomes the only route to reward. And it makes it very different. See, when I tell emotional people they have to wait, if you're emotional, waiting is not your trip. Every emotional person in their not self wants to be spontaneous. They think that spontaneous is cool because if you're emotional, it's the opposite of being emotional. And you get driven. Prove yourself. Be spontaneous. Strip that person now, or just rack them. I've watched so many emotional people go through their processes. And it's fascinating to recognize that they can wait. They can. I've seen it. I know it's true. Because you see, the moment that you move from seeing patience as a punishment to patience as a reward, it's a whole different story for you. It's a reward. You see, you're not complete without the time. You're not. See, I'm a spontaneous splenic manifester. I come right out of the spleen. When I look you in the eye the first time, I take you in, and that's it for me. It's enough for me. I have no other interest. I'm only spontaneous. The deepest imprint anybody ever makes in my life is the moment that I lay eyes on them. And then it's just there. Period. I'm only spontaneous. And because I'm splenic, whatever I feel in the moment that I look at somebody is only what I know in the moment and nothing else. It carries no weight. It's just an impression. It's what I live by. A spontaneous recognition of what is healthy for me or not. Now, if you're an emotional being, you're not like that at all. You're not as superficial as I am. Because you see, I don't have or take much time to take in a being. It doesn't mean I know them deeply. It does not. I don't. I'm a bit odd. There are things I know about everybody. But nonetheless, in the general sense of what it is, an emotional person has great depth as their potential. They're here to be the deepest of all of us. The deepest. And they're here to be the deepest of all of us because their process is to filter us through the wave. To filter us through the wave. You see, I only live myself one way. But an emotional person sees me in many ways. Many ways. All of those waves, all of those slices of perception add depth to their experience of me. When they're down, they see my darkness. When they're up, they see my light. They see me in a way that nobody else can see me, because they see me over time. And that the only way that they can know what kind of being I am is to take me in over time. And if somebody is standing on the outside and wants to measure depth, they will look and see that the emotional being knows me better than I can possibly know them. You know, that's the magic of being emotional. You're here to see things through a spectrum of perspective. It's how you build your clarity, how you move through your wave. And as you move through your wave, you get to see the same thing from different points of view. And it's not simply that you're seeing differently, but in seeing differently, you catch different things. You catch shadows and background, and you pick up all kinds of information, and you take it in over time. See, if you're an emotional person, it's not a punishment to be patient. It's your glory. It's everything for you. Life is short anyway. Don't be concerned. You're not missing anything while you're processing. I guarantee it. You're not missing anything. But when you're making decisions with clarity, you get everything. And as an emotional being, you have to recognize, look, that hand goes up and says, not now. I'm not ready yet. I need some time. I want to process this. And every time as an emotional being, you're able to stop your emotional system from being spontaneous. That's the moment you start working towards your depth. That's the moment that you can start going through the process of the measurement through the wave. And when you get to the end of that and you're clear, you're going to make the decision that's correct for you. And you will make that decision and you will get your reward, because the person out there that you pushed away, that person is standing there waiting to come back in. Willing to pay an additional price. You know, you're here to be rewarded for your patience, not punished. Generators have this incredible opportunity. And it begins with fooling your minds. Fool your minds. Get them involved immediately in your process. The generator mind wants to know itself. It's ready to participate in that experience. It's ready to go along with the game. It's willing to be fooled for a time. And if you take that as your first step, what you will see is that it will make it much easier for you to continue your generator process. You will have confirmation of the experience. You will begin to recognize that your sacral speaks with power for you. It's not this wishy-washy, uncertain mind, or the mind that's pretending to be certain that is all secondhand. This is a powerful instrument. And when it gives you its comment, it is a physical comment. You know, when you deal with a generator and they go, it goes right through your body. Right through your body, it's physical. And you bring your mind into the game, and you go through all your questions and response, and you get an insight immediately into who you are. Not who you can be. Who you are. Who you can be will emerge. 7 years. 7 years. No matter how fast you enter into the process, It still is going to take you 7 years. It's going to take you 7 years to be able to disconnect from the vast majority of the conditioning forces and their impact on you. And as a deconditioned being, when you get to the end of that 7 years, what you get is birth as yourself. And then we'll see where you go. Because then you will live out your mythology. You will live out your profile and your cross. You will live out your destiny. You will live out what is here for you in this life to experience. You know, this is the process. If you're an emotional being, that process is for you. And it means that more than anybody else, you can have great depth about the nature of that process. But it requires patience. It requires you to accept that nobody, you know, my mother, I have 2 older sisters. And she trained them to play hard to get. She figured that was the best strategy. Well, if you're an emotional generator, you play hard to get. You play as hard to get as you possibly can. And you'll see how worthy you really are to the other. You become more valued the moment you say, I'm not sure right now. Even if inside you're dreaming of just being able to say yes. You know? And most of the time, the greatest opportunity for generators are lost not by the ones who come and you have a positive reaction, but the ones who come and you have a negative reaction. You don't know where you are in your wave. Don't be so certain that that person that you originally go to and say, well, wait and give me a call, that that's going to stay your answer. You don't know. Not if you're emotional. You don't know. Clarity will teach you what is right for you and what is wrong for you. Waiting will show you how to be clear. And then you get to live out your depth. And you see, because you move through a wave, that depth of yours includes the worst and the best of anyone that you meet. It's a great gift. You know, you see the whole of a being. That's the beauty of your patience. You get to see the whole of a being. So everything about being a generator and being able to live as a generator, making decisions as yourself, but the first thing is to find out who you are. Find somebody you trust, go through your question and response, and begin your process of living as yourself.